It began like any other afternoon, the kind that carries no warning of how easily a moment can shift everything. The air was still, soft sunlight spilling through the kitchen window of my friend's house. She stood there, my friend's mom, rinsing a mug under the tap. The light caught the edges of her hair, long and black, flowing past her shoulders with a kind of effortless grace. I've been there 100 times before, laughing with my friend, eating dinner with their family. But that day felt different. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way her gaze lifted from the sink and found mine, steady, knowing, and just a little amused. She smiled faintly, like she caught me thinking something I shouldn't. And maybe she had. There was no accusation in her eyes, just curiosity, a spark of mischief. My breath hitched, and before I could look away, she tilted her head, lips curving slightly. "You keep looking at me like that," she said softly, drying her hand on a towel. Her tone wasn't sharp. It was teasing, almost musical, something between a warning and an invitation. I didn't answer right away. The sound of her voice lingered in the air like perfume, light and warm. She took a slow step closer, her presence calm but magnetic. "Careful," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "I might just let you." The words landed like a quiet thunder. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Every syllable carried both playfulness and restraint, as though she was testing the edges of something fragile. My heart pounded. I wanted to laugh it off, to say something clever, but the truth was I didn't want to break the moment. The tension wasn't uncomfortable, it was alive. Her gaze softened then, her lips parting like she might say more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned toward the counter, picked up the mug, and took a small sip of coffee. The room filled again with the gentle hum of ordinary life, the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, but nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. I noticed the little details I'd somehow missed before. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the faint smile lines near her eyes, the quiet confidence in how she moved. She wasn't trying to draw attention. She didn't need to. When my friend called from upstairs, it broke the spell, but only halfway. She looked over her shoulder once more, her expression unreadable now, half amusement, half something else. "Go on," she said softly, "before someone gets the wrong idea." But as I walked out of the kitchen, I knew someone already had, and it wasn't her. That look stayed with me long after I left the house. It wasn't just attraction, it was awareness. A quiet realization that some lines, once noticed, can't be unseen. And somewhere deep down, I already knew I'd cross paths with her again. Days passed, but her voice lingered in my mind. The way she said, "Asterisk, I might just let you." Asterisk it replayed in quiet moments, like a line from a song I couldn't stop humming. I told myself it was nothing, that she was just teasing, but every time I remembered the curve of her smile, the calm authority in her tone, I felt that same electric pull again. So when my friend invited me over the next weekend, I didn't hesitate. I told myself it was about hanging out, playing games, catching up. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt it again, the subtle warmth of that house, the scent of coffee, and something faintly floral. Her presence filled the space before she even appeared. And then, as if summoned by thought, she did. She was in the living room this time, barefoot, wearing a soft cream sweater and fitted jeans. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands framing her face. She looked up from a book when she heard me, her lips curling into that same knowing smile. "Back already?" she asked, her tone casual but edged with quiet amusement. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just here to see your son." "Of course you are," she said, marking her page and setting the book down. There was a pause, long enough to make the air feel heavier. "He's upstairs." I nodded, but I didn't move. I could feel her eyes on me, steady and calm, like she was waiting for something. "You always look like you're thinking too much," she said, leaning back slightly. "That's not a bad thing, just intense." Her words made me glance at her, and she smiled again, so faintly that it felt like a secret. "You don't have to look away," she added. "It's just conversation." But it didn't feel like just conversation. Every word carried undercurrents, unspoken meanings wrapped in quiet politeness. I sat down on the edge of the sofa across from her, pretending to relax, but the air between us felt charged. She noticed, of course. Her gaze flicked to my hands, then back to my face. "You're nervous," she said softly. "Maybe," I admitted, a half-smile escaping. "You're not easy to ignore." Her laugh was quiet and genuine. "Careful. Flattery sounds better when it doesn't sound like confession." There was a spark in her eyes then, warm, alive, teasing but grounded in something real. Before either of us could say more, footsteps thudded down the stairs. My friend's voice broke the tension like a gust of wind through a candle flame. She looked at me one last time, eyes glimmering with something unreadable, half challenge, half warning, and then turned away, picking up her book again as if nothing had happened. But as I followed my friend upstairs, I couldn't shake the thought that she'd meant every word she hadn't said. That moment, that look, it wasn't a mistake. It was a beginning neither of us had planned for. The next few days were strange, like living with a secret I hadn't agreed to keep. I found myself checking my phone for no reason, half expecting a message that would never come. Every glance, every word from that afternoon replayed in slow motion. The way she said, "You're nervous." The way her voice softened right after. The way she looked at me like she could see everything I wasn't saying. When I went back again a few days later, it wasn't planned. My friend had texted to grab something he'd left behind, and before I could think twice, I was walking that same familiar path. The house looked the same, but it felt different now, like it had begun to remember us too. The door was already open when I arrived. I stepped in, calling out, but only her voice answered from the kitchen. "Back again," she said, her tone casual, but there was that quiet undertone again, the one that always made my pulse quicken. She was leaning against the counter, stirring something in a cup. The sunlight streaming through the window touched her skin like gold, and for a moment, I forgot why I was even there. "He's not home," she added, turning slightly toward me. "But you knew that, didn't you?" The question wasn't sharp. It was soft, teasing but precise. She didn't wait for an answer. She poured a second cup of coffee and slid it toward me across the counter. "Sit," she said simply. I obeyed without thinking. The air smelled like roasted beans, and her perfume, something light with a trace of vanilla. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, not sure what to do with the rest of myself. "You seem quieter today," she said after a moment. "Maybe I just don't know what to say," I replied. Her lips curved slightly. "You always know what to say. You just don't always let yourself say it." There was no accusation in her tone, only understanding. That made it worse somehow. She stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the floor creaking lightly beneath her. Her sweater brushed my shoulder as she leaned past me to reach for something behind. The faint touch sent a jolt through me, not because it was bold, but because it was unintentional, or at least felt that way. "Sorry," she murmured, her breath close enough to warm my neck. "Didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't," I lied. Her eyes met mine again, calm, unreadable. "You're not very good at lying." "Neither are you," I said before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was thick, but not uncomfortable. She smiled, soft, thoughtful, and turned back toward the counter. "Maybe that's why you keep coming back," she said. "Because honesty looks different here." Her words lingered long after I left. That afternoon, I realized what was happening wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about connection, a quiet, dangerous one that neither of us wanted to name. And yet, deep down, I knew naming it was only a matter of time. The next time I saw her, everything felt different, subtly, dangerously different. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. Every glance, every pause had meaning now, and it scared me how easily I could feel it. I told myself I was just there to drop something off for my friend, but the truth was simpler and harder to admit. I wanted to see her again, to see if what I felt that day had been real, or just my imagination trying to fill the quiet. She opened the door before I even knocked, as if she'd been waiting. Her hair was tied loosely this time, a few strands falling to frame her face. She wore a light blue shirt that looked soft enough to touch, and jeans that made her seem effortlessly at home. "You really don't need a reason anymore, do you?" she said with a half smile. I froze for a second, unsure how to respond. Should I? Maybe not. Her tone was light, but her eyes said something else entirely. She turned and walked toward the living room, motioning for me to follow. I did. The afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains, painting the room in warm gold. She sat down on the couch, crossing one leg over the other. I stayed standing for a moment, then joined her, close but not too close. Close enough to feel the air shift when she moved. We talked at first about small things. Work, plans, life. But it didn't stay small for long. Do you ever feel like you're stuck between what you want and what you're supposed to want? She asked, her gaze fixed on the coffee table, not me. All the time, I said. It's like one side keeps whispering while the other side's yelling. She looked up then, her expression unreadable. And which one do you listen to? The whisper, I admitted quietly. She smiled at that, soft, approving, maybe a little sad. Good. The whisper's usually honest. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The sound of a clock ticking filled the room, steady and too loud. I watched the way her fingers traced the edge of her coffee mug, the way her foot swayed slightly in thought. When she finally spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. You know this, whatever this is, it's dangerous. I know. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. And yet, you're still here. So are you. That made her laugh, a low, warm laugh that filled the air and made my chest ache. Touché, she said. There was something in that laugh that felt like surrender, like she'd stopped pretending to keep the distance we both knew was already gone. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. I turned to say goodbye, but she stepped closer, just slightly, enough for her perfume to catch the air between us. Her hand brushed my arm. Light, quick, but deliberate. Be careful, she said. Of what? Her eyes held mine for a second too long. Of what happens when you stop pretending this doesn't mean something. The door closed softly behind me, but her words didn't. They followed me all the way home. The days that followed were quiet, but nothing about that quiet felt calm. It was the kind that hums under your skin, where every thought circles back to the same place, the same person. I told myself to stop thinking about her. I told myself it was wrong. But every time I replayed that last moment, her hand brushing mine, the way she said, be careful, like it meant more, the distance between us grew smaller in my mind. When I finally went back, it wasn't planned. My friend wasn't home, and I should have turned around. I didn't. She opened the door again, the same warm scent, the same steady eyes. But this time, there was no surprise. She knew I'd come back. I figured it wouldn't be long, she said softly, leaning against the doorframe. I smiled, though my voice came out lower than I meant. Guess I'm predictable. No, she said, shaking her head just enough for her dark hair to shift across her shoulders. Just curious. That word lingered between us, too heavy to ignore. She stepped aside, and I walked in. The sunlight hit her face as she closed the door, bright enough to make her squint, soft enough to show the faint smile lines around her eyes. Little signs of life that only made her more real, more magnetic. We stood there not speaking. I didn't know what to say. She didn't either. But our silence had learned how to talk for us. Finally, she broke it. You keep showing up like you're trying to prove something. Maybe I am, I said. Her brow lifted slightly. And what exactly are you trying to prove? That I can handle this. She laughed, quiet and disbelieving. Handle me? I met her gaze. Maybe. That smile of hers faltered for just a second. She looked at me, really looked like she was measuring what she saw. Then she said, almost to herself, you shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you'll make me forget I'm supposed to be the careful one. Her words weren't sharp, but they hit deep. It was the closest either of us had come to admitting that whatever this was, it wasn't a game anymore. She walked past me toward the kitchen, brushing my shoulder lightly as she did. It was a small touch, simple, human, but it felt like the line we'd been walking just shifted beneath us. When she turned back, her voice was low but steady. You should go before we both stop pretending this is harmless. I didn't move. Neither did she. The world seemed to narrow down to the space between us, bright, quiet, trembling. Then she sighed, stepped closer, and reached out. Her hand lingered just long enough against my chest for me to feel her pulse through her fingertips. "Go," she whispered, "before I forget to tell you too." But when I left that time, there was no doubt left in either of us. The line had already been crossed. The next few days were a blur of avoidance. I didn't go by the house. I didn't text her. But no matter what I tried, her voice stayed in my head, soft, steady, trembling in that last whisper. Go before I forget to tell you too. It wasn't guilt I felt. It was something deeper, the kind of ache that comes from wanting someone you shouldn't. I told myself it was a crush, a phase, curiosity, like she'd said before. But that was a lie. What I felt wasn't fleeting. It was something real, something that scared me because it wasn't supposed to happen. Then one evening, the message came, "You left your jacket here." It was simple, too casual to be harmless. But my heart raced anyway. When I arrived, she was in the garden, kneeling by the roses, wearing a light linen dress that swayed with the wind. The setting sun painted her skin in gold, and for a moment, I just stood there, frozen in the quiet beauty of it. She looked up and smiled. "Didn't think you'd actually come back. I wasn't sure I should, but you did." There was no challenge in her tone, just calm acceptance. Like she already knew how this would end, and maybe, deep down, so did I. She dusted her hands on her dress and stood. The breeze carried her perfume again, warm vanilla and something faintly floral. She handed me my jacket, but when I reached for it, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away. "I didn't mean to make things complicated," she said quietly. "I don't usually let anyone get this close." "You didn't let me," I said. I just didn't stop. Her lips parted slightly at that, a hint of a smile flickering through her doubt. "You really think this is a good idea?" "No," I admitted, "but it doesn't feel wrong either." That silence again, not empty this time, but full. Heavy. Every unspoken thing we'd been avoiding pressed between us. She looked down, then back up with a small sigh. "You don't know what you're doing to me." I could say the same. Her eyes softened. She stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "You're too young to understand what this means," she whispered. "People will talk. I don't care what they say." She smiled sadly. "You think you don't, but someday you might." I shook my head. "The only thing I'll regret is not telling you the truth." "And what's the truth?" "That I can't stop thinking about you." The words hung there, bare, vulnerable. Her breath caught, just for a second, and then she reached out, touching my face with trembling fingers. "You shouldn't have said that," she murmured, her thumb brushing my jawline. "Why not?" "Because now I can't pretend anymore." The sun dipped below the fence, the last light fading, and in that moment, the confession between us changed everything. Neither of us said another word. We didn't have to. The air already knew. The night after that confession lingered in both of us like the echo of something too real to forget. Every word we hadn't said still vibrated in the air, every touch, every glance that went on a beat too long. I didn't know what would happen next, only that pretending nothing had changed was impossible. When I went back the next day, she was waiting on the porch, coffee cup in hand, staring out into the late afternoon light. The warmth of the sun brushed across her face, softening every line, every quiet trace of hesitation. When she saw me, there was no surprise, just a knowing, like she'd already decided what she needed to say. "I thought you wouldn't come," she said, her voice steady but low. "I tried not to," I replied. Didn't work. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "You really are stubborn. Or maybe honest." She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "You make it sound like that's a good thing. It is when it's real." That word, real, seemed to catch her. She placed the cup aside and stepped closer, studying me the way she always did, as if weighing every feeling against reason. Her eyes shimmered with something between fear and longing. "You don't understand what this could cost," she said finally. "For both of us." "I don't care about the cost," I said. "I care about what's right in front of me." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The wind moved through the trees. The faint scent of her perfume drifted between us again, familiar now, grounding. She exhaled slowly, her voice trembling just enough to betray what she was holding back. "Then tell me," she said, "what is this really?" I took a breath. "It's not a mistake. It's not confusion. It's connection." Her eyes met mine. and something inside her gave way. The composure, the walls, the careful distance, all of it melted. She reached out, her hand finding mine, fingers lacing slowly, deliberately. Her touch was warm, certain. For the first time, she didn't pull away. "Every time I tell myself to stop," she whispered, "I end up wanting to see you more." "I know," I said. "I feel the same." Her gaze softened. "Then what do we do now?" "We stop lying to ourselves." That broke her, not in sadness, but in surrender. A quiet breath escaped her lips, and she stepped closer until I could feel the warmth of her skin through her dress, her heartbeat against my chest, calm but uneven. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world felt smaller, slower, like everything beyond this moment didn't matter. Finally, she whispered, "Then I guess there's no going back." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. There never was. And then, in that fragile, suspended space between right and wrong, between fear and desire, we both knew this wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something neither of us could unfeel. The sun slipped behind the trees, the day fading around us, but the warmth stayed. It wasn't just light anymore, it was us.